What is up, BNCers? Welcome to BNC Cast. Randy here. I want to talk to you a little bit about honesty. In the kids department, we've talked about honesty all month long in the month of May. And while we've had a lot of fun, we've done some pies in the faces and spraying people with water and having some really hilarious, fun skits, we have taught the kids about honesty. And I learned something too about honesty. Amidst all the fun, it got me thinking, am I really honest with God? Not that I'm telling lies to God, but am I honest with Him? Unpacking that question ended up being a lot more than what I thought it was going to be. And it ended up being pretty awesome. I mean, I talk to Him daily, right? I tell Him everything, don't I? This is where the examination really began. And this is where the Holy Spirit started talking to me. You know, we go to doctors for exams. We do a lot of preventative medicine. When it comes to that, you know, we check for tests and checks for cancer and check for cavities and all of that. And those things are there, those tests and exams are there to prevent something worse from happening. Why wouldn't it also be the same in our spiritual lives? So thus begins my personal examination, or allowing the Holy Spirit to examine me and really unpack this question. What the Holy Spirit pointed out to me was that I wasn't being dishonest with God, but I wasn't being honest. And there's a difference between the two. When you think about it in terms of being genuine, I wasn't being genuine with God. I was failing to take things to Him. I was failing to talk to Him. In short, I was failing to pray to Him. Honesty is really just being genuine. When I say that I'm being honest with God, it means I'm being genuine. I'm being real with God. And that happens in prayer. Now, then I started thinking about, well, where am I lacking in prayer? What am I not doing? Because God, I talk to you every day, right? You know, I'm connecting with you every day. But sometimes we connect at a surface level, and we never go deeper than that surface level. And that's where God was taking me to. And so I started looking at some of the different things that prevent me from going to that level. One of those things happens to be busyness. We're all so busy, and we don't take the time to spend with Him in prayer. We don't take the real time. That's where we stay on that surface, where we're not really connecting at a deeper level. To connect on that deeper level, it requires a sacrifice. It requires time. It requires us disconnecting from that busyness and really connecting with God. So number one was busyness. One of the other things was imbalanced priorities. If your priorities are out of whack, it causes problems all across the board in your life, including your relationship with God. If your priorities are out of whack, you're definitely not prioritizing prayer time with Him. What begins happening are surface level type prayers. I think you might see a trend there and where this is going. Those surface level prayers don't contain any body. There's no meat to them. They just are on the surface. They never go deeper than that. And our priorities, when they are out of whack, cause that to happen. Imbalanced priorities prevent that deepness that we really desire. And imbalanced priorities keep us just on that surface, never going any deeper. And while we're on the subject of prayer, since this whole thing is going to be about prayer, did you know that God desires to hear from you? Probably more than you from Him. It's true. God is relational. I mean, the cross is more than just a get out of hell free card. The cross is to create and to bridge that gap so that you have a relationship with God. And a relationship requires communication. He desires to hear from us. I had also discovered throughout this whole process that I had begun to believe a really gross lie from the enemy. That I was just on my own, that I was going to have to handle everything, that I was going to have to fix it, that I was going to have to be the one to make it all work. And that's just so gross, because that's totally not what God has for us. That's totally not what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be relying on the Holy Spirit. We are supposed to be deeper than that surface level. But when we exist on that surface level, that's where we're at. It doesn't run deep enough to be able to rely on Him and trust Him and take those things to Him. We end up being a self-dependence versus a God-dependence. And that's not where we're supposed to be. The most mature believers that I know are ones that are very honest with themselves and with God about how much they depend on God. And there it was. Not being honest with how much I just really needed that deep relationship with Him. Busyness, priorities, believing a lie, all kept me on a surface. All kept me from going deeper. And not being honest with God creates a gap. And that gap prevents us from being deeper. That gap kind of keeps us languishing on the surface instead of going deeper. We end up staying on the surface, unwilling to sacrifice what's needed for that deeper relationship. And that's where it is. It's in that word sacrifice. Think about the Garden of Gethsemane. Here Jesus is in anguish. He feels this whole huge weight that's on Him. He even asks God, take this cup from me. And God denies him that request. But what's interesting is that Jesus gets up with new resolve. He spends that time in prayer. He sacrifices that time in prayer. And he gets up with a new resolve to walk forward and take our sin upon him. Now think about this for a minute. Without Jesus' Gethsemane moment, there would have never been a pouring out of the Holy Spirit. Let that sink in for just a moment. You and I will probably never face what Jesus faced, but that does not excuse us from trying to drive past the surface to a deeper level relationship with Him. It doesn't excuse us from pushing through the surface, pushing back the business, the priorities, not believing a lie, whatever the case may be, to drive down to a deeper relationship, to have more and more of those deep connection moments with God. Those deep connection moments require one huge thing: sacrifice. They never happen without us sacrifice. Sometimes it's sacrificing time. Sometimes it's sacrificing a relationship. Sometimes it's sacrificing doing something else so that we can spend that time, so that we can invest that time. It's very interesting. There was absolutely no gap between Jesus and His Father. No gap whatsoever. Those two guys were as tight as they could be. You know, we can have the same thing. We can have as much of God as we want. Truth is, we already do. God's already there. I'm wide open for you. It's up to us to take the step forward. It's up to us to sacrifice, to take that step forward, to break through the surface and drive into a deeper prayer life with Him. I realized that after that examination, after this period of time, that I wanted to be so far gone in Jesus that it was just so easy to release everything to Him. Almost as if it came automatic, like my next breath. I wanted honesty. I wanted genuineness. I wanted that realness. I wanted to be so far gone in Him that I knew without a doubt that my next breath completely depended on Him. You know, one of my favorite stories in the Bible is when Peter gets out of the boat and starts walking on the water. He is completely reliant upon Jesus. And in fact, when he starts to drown, it's even more so. His next breath literally is dependent upon Jesus. And then Jesus reaches down and pulls him up. Some days, I do this thing called being a believer really well. And I equate that to walking on water. Some days my eyes are fixed on Him and I'm doing things like exactly how I should, and I'm diving deeper. I'm not just staying on the surface, just existing there. Other seasons though of my life, I end up languishing. I end up just existing on the surface and never diving deeper. And what I end up finding is I'm up to my nostrils in water, drowning, kind of like what Peter did. I'm just thankful that Jesus still reaches down with His right arm and pulls us up. So what's the take home with this? What does all this mean? You know, asking myself this question of am I honest with God? I think it comes down to this. It comes down to breaking through that surface level on a consistent basis. It's a preventing of the drowning moments where you feel like you're up to your nose in water and you feel like you're drowning and the waves are crashing around you. And you feel like you've got to take care of all of this stuff all on your own, because that's not where we're supposed to live. We're supposed to live on the water, walking with Jesus. But to live there, it takes doing that preventatively. It takes living consistently in that deep prayer life, and that requires sacrifice. But see, here's the thing. It reminds me of what a bunter does in baseball. They'll do a sacrifice bunt to advance the next player down to the next base so they can get in a better scoring position. The neat thing about that bunter is that even though he gets out in baseball, it does not count as an at-bat. So therefore, it doesn't count against his batting average. We may make a sacrifice to have that deeper than a surface level relationship, that deeper than surface level prayer life with Him. But that sacrifice always reaps huge dividends. God always takes care of us when we sacrifice in that way. That's my challenge. That's my challenge for me. That's my challenge for you. Drive past that surface. Dig down a little deeper to the point where you find out that you too want to be so far gone in Jesus that releasing to Him becomes like your next breath. Thanks so much for being a part of our BNC family.